Job chapters 15 to 24 today, and this continues the conversation between Job and his rubbish friends who've come along basically just to be mean to him, it seems. But there are some really interesting ideas that come up in this one today, so this got particularly interesting. We open with Eliphaz, who is responding to Job's complaints about God in the previous video. Basically a very long, la-di-da poetic speech that's difficult to decipher still. That theme is carrying on. But basically telling Job to kind of shut up, watch your mouth and stop being a whinging person. Job responds to that saying, I think under the circumstances, it's not particularly unreasonable that I'm a little bit cranky. Then Job goes on to have another big complaint. His friend Bilbo, or whatever his name was, then responds, mercifully short this bit, but actually includes the words, when will you end these speeches? So, yeah, I was sort of picking up on the idea that they're not happy, and it's difficult to tell from the poeticness, but that would seem to slam dunk that, yes, okay, they are definitely having some sort of argument. Job responds by having another big rant about God, but as part of this, interestingly, seems to suggest that he's going to die soon, or seems to think he's going to die soon, but seems to suggest that he's going to see God during that. I'm not sure if I've got that completely wrong, but that's how it sort of seemed anyway. Whatever Job does say in that speech, it seems to have upset Zaphod Beeblebrox, whatever his name is, because he says he feels compelled to respond because he's had his honour impugned or something. It's not clear from what Job said what upset him, but I don't really care. I don't think so. We're going to move on. But Zaphod, whatever his name is, does have a very interesting point. It refers to evil as being sweet in the mouth, but only for a short time. I love that idea. I don't think the Bible has covered that so far, the seductive allure of evil. And it ties up well with the Star Wars idea, isn't it? Yoda talking about the dark side being quicker and more seductive and easier. And to have that actually addressed, and it makes sense we're having this addressed in a bit of a story that's about Satan. Evil being seductive and seeming like a good way, I don't know, I find that particularly interesting. Job, however, seems to almost contradict this because he asks the question then, why do the wicked do so well? But Zaphod, whatever his name was, has just said that they don't do well. They seem to do well for a while and then they stop. So I don't quite know how that's working. But Job having that attitude is a welcome change from everything in the Bible this far. If someone has good fortune or bad fortune, it's ascribed to God, which seems like a very narrow sort of theism, doesn't it? But so I like the idea that Job is saying that bad people do actually do fine in life, or seem to at the very least. And so that certainly agrees better with the real world than, well, unless God is actually doing all that sort of stuff. But that seems very unlikely, I think. Job, anyway, seems to suggest that the wicked are delivered from the day of wrath, whatever that is. But that doesn't seem to agree with anything else. It seems like he's just having this big old whinge. But yeah, that would seem to be in a biblical sense, that would not seem to agree with what's likely to be the concept of justice, I suppose. We then come all the way back to Hector Elizondo, or whatever his name is, and he has a really interesting idea in that he asks, what benefit is it to God if someone is righteous? He also suggests that Job isn't that righteous, which would seem to be reasonable, albeit the story portrays him as a sinless man. But it's not a true story, and there are no sinless people, I don't think. I don't think that's supposed to be a thing. But yeah, that's great, isn't it? You think God created everybody and is outside the universe by virtue of if he created the universe, he can't have been inside it. Therefore, he's external to it. So presumably he could click his fingers and we all just disappear if we were terrible. And you kind of think someone that big and powerful, what benefit is it to him if we are good or we're bad? And yeah, I think that's a really interesting, deeply profound theological question. No idea what the answer is, obviously, but hopefully that will get answered for us at some point. I like that that's come up there anyway. Finally, we have Job, who just comes straight out with it and raises the problem that why can't people find God when they're looking for him? Which is also great because that then sort of agrees a little bit with modern days. Because in the Old Testament, everybody's just running around talking to God. It's like they've got a mobile phone or something and can just call him up. Maybe not to quite that extent, but certainly in contrast to the modern day, where as far as when nothing is happening, I appreciate that's my world, I'm not seeing anything happening. Maybe there is lots of stuff, and I'm sure there are people who claim lots of stuff is happening now. But I like that the question of the elusiveness of God in day-to-day is being raised. even if actually from reading Genesis, my feeling was that it makes perfect sense that God would be not absent, but not in people's faces. So yeah, there's 4 really big ideas in that. Actually, it's not that short a passage, that took ages to read, but in that little section anyway, some really interesting stuff. I think the next video, the conversation is going to wrap up, and then shortly after that, God is going to have his say. So it should be interesting, and hopefully this all brings it all nicely together, and maybe we get some answers to these big ideas.